Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry, and it's a pleasure to be here with you again for another episode of the 247 Real Talk podcast. I'm hoping that you had a great week since we last spoke. I thank you for all those who reached out to me, who continue to engage in conversation. I thank you for all the new subscribers that continue to grow. I do apologize that I've been still struggling with some audio issues on the board, and I haven't been able to isolate exactly what's causing the, it's sort of a blip if you listen carefully every so often. But I'll get to it and I'll work it out. In the meantime, we have many things going on in the world and in the United States. So like I said, first and foremost, I hope you had a great week and you're ready for another upcoming weekend. Summer is here. Summer in New York is great. It's not summer officially yet, but it sure felt like it many days this week, and for me that was a welcome change in season. So anyway, this week I'm going to talk about sort of two unrelated things. I'm not sure what I'm going to call this episode, but one is going to be about criminal justice system. The other one is going to be, not in the way you're thinking either, and the other one is going to be about guns in our society and especially where it comes to kids. So sit back, relax, and I'll be right back with you. Welcome back to the podcast. I have myself on mute there for a second. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I thank you for joining me. I've gotten a lot of good feedback about this forum and this way we sit and chat like we were in each other's living rooms, sitting across from each other. And I'm appreciative of all the embracing I'm receiving and all the encouragement. As I think about different topics I talk about this week, there are two things that came to mind. They're a little bit unrelated, but still, I felt it very important to have this conversation. If you hear any noise in the background, my cameras keep going off. It's one of those nights when it's a bit wonderful day, but we're going to have some storms tonight, and so it may be setting off motion on the cameras a bit. And I do apologize if you get that sound. So the first thing I want to talk about is what's going on with young people, kids especially. And I can only talk about it from the perspective of New York because that's where I live. In this, over the past week, there were 3 shootings that came to my attention. One resulted in a death where a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old cousins, they're not sure what the deal is yet, and obviously for legal reasons they're not saying. But speculation is they were playing with a gun. The gun went off, and the 14-year-old was shot and killed. The second is 2 girls in a park. One 9-year-old, I think I'm looking at my screen, other screen here, one 11-year-old, were shot. There was a group of maybe a total of 6 people shooting at each other. These 2 young girls apparently had nothing to do with it. They were just victims of the senseless shootings that are going on across the country, across the world in some cases, but a lot of it is here embedded in our culture in the United States. Now I have a listener, he knows who he is, you've heard him before, but we have a lot of debates about gun control in America. As independent as I am with everything else, I'm also sort of in the middle with this, where neither side of the coin probably embraces me completely. I am a range safety officer. I am certified in certain firearms trainings. I have trained people. Gun safety being the #1 priority, but more so going beyond anything that I can or I have learned and trained people, is something to do with our society and who has guns, who should not have guns, and how these guns continue to get into the hands of young people. I remember several years ago when we talked about guns getting into the hands of young people, we were talking about 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds. Now we're talking about 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds. We're talking about young ladies, 9 and 11 years old, being shot. I think it was last year, there were several young ladies who were shot and killed over what we call juvenile romantic relationships between 12 and 14 and 16-year-olds. There's a epidemic in the United States where guns are concerned. And it puts me in an awkward position because I believe in the right to protect yourself. I believe in the right to bear arms if you are legal, law-abiding, trained, qualified, and deemed responsible enough to do so. I know there are many opponents of this. Many of my listeners oppose my view on this, but I'm sorry, that sounds my tablet in case that's bothering you, my Android tablet. But understand where I'm coming from, and I want to take a moment to explain. I know I'm going to get some backlash because I know some of my listeners are adamant about abolishing the Second Amendment and just ending all of this, which will never happen. So mine comes from a place of realism, reality, a reality check. One, guns have been a part of the American society forever, as far back as we can go. Two, there's been freedoms with guns where people have accumulated huge numbers, especially guys who like to collect 300, 400, 500 weapons, that over the years they've collected that the government or no authority, no governing body has any knowledge of or where they exist and who has them. Any effort to say to attack the Second Amendment, I think, is nonsensical because, number one, we're too late and too far in that will make any kind of difference. Number two, if we look at the origin of that, we need to understand that as we look at governments and we look at governing bodies, we recognize that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And somewhere ingrained in that was the right of the people to defend themselves, even if it's against tyranny or the abuse of power somewhere in society. We live in a place now where crime is around every corner. We live in a place where the response by law enforcement, however great it may be or not in certain areas, is usually a reactive response, right? It's not a proactive response, meaning they don't know where the crime is going to be committed. The crime happens, either you can defend yourself or they come with an ambulance to take you injured, wounded, or dead. So what we're talking about here really is being responsible gun owners, who should have guns, and how these things should be managed so that they don't get into the hands of children. Even for someone like myself who's sitting here telling you that I am quite well trained in firearm and firearm safety, it bothers me to see 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 12 and 14-year-olds playing with a gun. Where did they get that gun from? Who in society feels it's okay to give a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old a gun? Somebody gave it to him. There may be the one-off case where there was somebody running from the police and then some kid found a gun, but that's not where the volume of them are coming from. Someone is completely flooding our neighborhoods, especially struggling neighborhoods, neighborhoods of poverty neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, neighborhoods that are majority people of color, with the guns, maybe with the intention of them destroying each other, or the hope. Either way, we cannot continue like this. We have elections every 4 years. We have House of Representative elections, was it every 2 years? And when we look at the issues that we make decisions about, no one pays attention to the fact that these guns are killing our children. And when I say these guns are killing our children, the gun is the instrument. So the problem is also bigger than the instrument, right? The problem is the mentality of so many of our youth and so many in our neighborhoods, that the way to solve a problem is to remove someone from this earth, to take their life so they're no longer a part of your, it could be your misery, your agitation, or they just upset you and you feel that you're that powerful and mighty because you have a gun in your hand. I, to be honest, could be honest with you and say that as much as I believe in responsible gun ownership, I am so fed up of seeing young people shot and killed, and children now, 12 and 14 years old. I've got young children. That if someone could say to me they had a magic pill where they would do something that got rid of all the guns from every single person and no one can kill anyone, I might actually think about it for a moment. I mean, and I know that sounds crazy for me just to say think about it, but understand that whether we are oblivious to it or we want to be ignorant about it, it is the mentality of human beings that are creating the destruction, okay? The gun is simply the instrument that they're using. So if someone has the inclination to kill and you remove a weapon, a firearm, if we don't fix the mental health, if we don't fix what's going on with us as human beings, then we will find some other method to take lives. That will not change it. It can't do it as destructive. I get that, right? Where someone can take an AR-15, someone who is proficient with a semi-automatic handgun and has loads of magazines can, keep reloading and firing. It can't do it in that manner. But a lot of the shootings, even when we say mass shootings, and we use this word mass very loosely, 2 or 3 people, we call it a mass shooting, and I guess in a certain sense it is. But I'm saying someone who stabs someone or is intent on killing can do that much damage to 3 or 4 or 5 people with a knife or a machete as well. I'm not saying this for us to get into an argument. I know there are differences, but that's the point. There are all these differences, and the two sides are just sitting apart. No one wants to talk to each other. No one wants to give a little. No one wants to come up with common ground where we can at least make a dent in these lives that are being senselessly lost day in and day out, these young people, where our children are going to school and metal detectors are picking up kids with guns in their book bags. My weapon growing up was a pen and a pencil and a book. My weapon was the spelling book to win the spelling bee. These days, it's a 12-year-old telling a 14-year-old that they're dating and the girl likes some other guy, so he's going to kill the guy or kill the girl. These are the issues that our kids are dealing with now. And we are walking around as adults like we don't have a responsibility, and we're acting so oblivious to the fact that we prefer to put partisanship of Republican and Democrats over saving the lives of our children and our people in our society. We are so polarized, we hate each other so much that the issues that we should be sitting down sensibly to solve as grown adults, as people that supposedly have common sense, enough common sense to be elected to office and Congress and the House and lead this country, you would think that we've gotten to a point where we could put differences aside for the benefit of saving lives, but we can't. We have gotten to such a degraded state of humanity, all ages, starting from us, the adults, who have allowed this to trickle down to the young people, by instead of making choices and making changes that force them to sort of conform to a better standard, even if they, as I said, force, even if they don't do it willingly initially, and by setting examples for them to follow. Look at the examples we are setting. We are so polarized by segregation of ideologies in this country that the young people are realizing that they have to fend for themselves because we're not even paying attention to the things that are important. And I'll use that as a segue into how irresponsible we are being as adults and how irresponsible we are being because of our ideologies, political ideology between Democrat and Republican. I want to read a definition to you. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, investigates and, where warranted, tries individuals charged with the gravest crimes of concern to the international community: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. As a court of last resort, it seeks to complement, not replace, national courts, governed by an international treaty called the Rome Statute. Now, I wanted to give that definition of international criminal court because it is a court of law. I have often had episodes where I stress the fact that there must be a separation of power in the branches of government. And the judiciary must be impartial and must be left to act according to the law on its own. Over the years, we have seen that we have a system in America here where presidents appoint or nominate and get appointed judges on the Supreme Court who are there for life. And how the court thinks and how its ideology is based on which president gets to nominate a judge. And in the case, for instance, of President Obama, when he would have gotten to nominate, I think, his third judge, and since he's a Democrat, we say liberal, right? The conservatives, the Republicans did everything that they could in their power, and made sure that he was blocked from his right as a president because they didn't want him to tilt the court as liberal. But then they did everything in their power to confirm when President Trump was in office to make sure they tilted the court conservative. And this is a game we're playing when it comes to law. Now, I say this because what is troubling to me is that the International Criminal Court, the judges on the International Criminal Court, decided to issue arrest warrants for members of the Israeli government. I am not making this about the conflict at this time because that is a different side conversation, and it's a heated one, and it's one that if and when I have it with you, it'll be well thought through. My problem here is whatever the action of the International Criminal Court by judges, the United States government chose, well, that's what the Congress, United States governing bodies, the House of Representatives, chose in a bipartisan way. This is not partisan. This was voted on by both Democrats and Republicans to sanction the International Criminal Court. Now, they thought this would go through, and the Biden administration has opposed them, this bipartisan passage by the House of Representatives. And I'm going to say that the Biden administration, in this instance, seems to have a way better understanding of what's needed between the separation of branches of government and the fact that the judiciary must be impartial and left to run according to the law. We don't sanction the United States Supreme Court when they make decisions. We had landmark decisions with Roe versus Wade and other decisions last year that shook this society. No one voted to sanction the United States Supreme Court because the fact of the matter is the court has to be that impartial body, and you have to deal with it as is, even if they vote against your beliefs. If the governing, the party in power, does not agree with the decision of the Supreme Court, then they do like Biden did with student loans and others. They find other ways to move their legislation and their ideologies forward. I think it's absurd. I think it's presumptuous that the House of Representatives decided to sanction a judicial body, the International Criminal Court. What you're doing by doing that is destructive. And by destructive, I mean that you are telling judges that they cannot make decisions based on their knowledge of the law or what they deem to be the proper application of the law. Because consequences will come, political consequences will come that should make them pause and should make them go against their own good conscience before making decisions or avoid them altogether. When we get to a place where a judicial body has to live in fear of political persecution and political sanctions, we have completely blurred the lines between laws that govern all man and politics that is a scourge these days, that is a corruptible mechanism of differences of ideologies. That's two different things. I think we have to be so careful. And again, I'm going to applaud the Biden administration for not going along with this sanction of the ICC. You have to find ways to say, if you disagree with a decision by the court, what mechanism is there to let them know how you feel, but not only handicap, but scare, put the fear into judges so they stop making decisions based on the law and their knowledge of the law, impartial decisions, and start making decisions over how they think the politicians will react. The judiciary has to be as close as we can get to a quote-unquote clean body of thinking. What's more, I find more presumptuous about this is that a lot of the decisions by the ICC are sort of more significant as a decision, but many times they're not enforceable, right? Because as I read to you, the court, where did I say it? The court seeks to complement, not replace national courts. So as a complement, they don't have any kind of enforceable mechanism. They don't own armies. They don't control armies or anything. They can't order an army of any country to do something, to go take someone out of power, to go arrest someone. They can't. What they do is hope that the international community will stand behind them in terms of judicial decisions and allow them to make the decision that is void of political influence or any other influence, and that's purely based on the law and violation of law. In this country, when we go to court, and we have many levels of courts here, right? We have state courts, we have federal courts, you have appeal courts, you have the Supreme Court. If you disagree with the decision of a court, you appeal it. But at no point does the United States say, well, the Federal Appeal Court made a decision, and so Congress is going to get together and the House of Representatives is going to sanction that court for that decision. That will destroy, completely destroy the quilt of what a judicial system, laws, and the enforcement of laws is all about. We have become so presumptuous. We have become so corruptible. We've become so hateful. We've become so partisan that all the things that are precious in life, preserving life, having us live decent lives, making decisions, government making decisions so that we all can have a better life, health-wise, healthcare system, financial system, childcare system, all of that has gone on the back burner and is replaced by political power, political prowess, greed, racism, hate, and the division of what is called, let's make sure we say it clearly, the division of the United States of America. That statement alone shows how contradictory we are to our own existence here in the United States of America. We've got to find a way. I don't know if it's too late already. I mean, we have a system where people believe in candidates and they want to kill each other if you don't agree with them. People want to kill each other if they have a difference of opinion. And now we've gone to the point where we want to sanction a court of law. Have we ever thought about how far-reaching the effects are when we make these kinds of decisions? For those of you who stand with me, whose homes are governed by the Almighty God, whose homes serve God, who believe in our Creator, who are spiritual. None of this is kind of shocking because biblically it has been written already what man will do as part of the self-destruction and flying in the face of their Creator. But since we know this, since we are able to read that good book for ourselves and we're intelligent enough to discern what it says, I'm always hopeful that despite the fact that what is written is already written, that what will happen, that we can do something at least to lessen the blow, to prolong the goodness and righteousness that's left, what little of it is left in this world. Every week I plead with you to join this cause and to join my cause, to join the movement, to big up the conversation. It's so important because if more of us start talking about positivity, if more of us start putting pressure on Washington to do the right thing, if more of us decide that we don't care about Republican or Democrat, we care about us as people, black, white, green, yellow, male, female, whatever, human beings. I know this is wishful thinking because most people will listen to the podcast. Most of my listeners will agree, but many will give up and throw their hands up because the order is so tall and because each and every day we leave our homes or our jobs or we go to work and we're witness or we're the victims of the exact same atrocities of which I speak. The racism, the hatred, the bullyism, the greed. I don't know how we expect the next generation to survive and to have some level of decency, to enjoy what we enjoyed as kids. Have you ever stopped to think back just 40, 50 years ago, how different the world was? How much innocence has been lost in the last 50 years? How much we have degraded as human beings mentally, spiritually, ethically, morally? It's easy to say it's too big. And it might be too big for one person. But if I'm sitting before you here every week taking on this challenge and asking you to join me, then think about if there are millions of people like me in one voice, millions enough to sway an election, millions enough to stay away from an election or to force an election to take on a form of decency and force our political appointees in Washington to start understanding in their hard heads, elected by the people, for the people. To make them understand that this feeling of power that they possess is a myth. I can tell you that over the last year, I can't count, or it takes both of my hands, all 10 fingers, to count the number of times I've been shocked by the death of someone. Someone I saw just recently. Someone who looked as fit as a fiddle one day and was dead the next. That experience in all of our lives should make us recognize how little power we have and how much the power we think we have is a myth. We can make someone else's life miserable. We can be so egregious to take the lives of others. We can do things to say that one of God's children is less than the other, even though we created equal with the same blood, the same way. But we can't stop when that second or that minute or that microsecond in time comes, when our Creator says it's over. And we leave this earth helpless, unable to stop what was so designated by our Creator to be. It's important that we take the time now to do the best we can to be righteous. I'm not asking you to do this alone. I don't want to do it alone either. But the more of us join this conversation, the more we pick topics, the more we pick battles, and we unite. You remember the days of the Million Man March? That took a lot to get that many people. But if it was done once, it can be done again. It can be done with way more than 1 million. When we scream enough, people will listen. Think about the cases, for instance, of George Floyd. When initially no one wanted to listen, and the country rose up, thousands of people in every state around this country made so much noise and so much destruction that the powers that be had no choice but to listen. I am not telling you to be destructive. I am not telling you to do anything to hurt your communities or others. I am telling you that when we stand together, we can figure out ways and things to do that the powers that be have to pay attention and are forced to turn away from their evil, misguided ways and do the jobs they were hired to do. I've been on here longer than I expected to be again this week, but you can feel my passion in what I'm saying. We have to make a difference, and the time to start was yesterday. Let's get going. Join me. It is an honor for me to speak with you, an honor to have these conversations, an honor to have this podcast, and an honor to have your support. Again, I thank my ever-loyal supporters and all the newcomers who are joining, at least listening, and hopefully soon will be standing beside me, making our voices heard loud enough to start this along this journey of change. I wish you a great week ahead, a great weekend. Do enjoy the weather, because for those of us who live in the part of the country with the 4 seasons, it'll soon be fall again. So do enjoy. Take care of your families. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. And please take care of each other.